Lord of the West, Governor of Heaven, Earth and Underworld, Claimer of Hearts, Anubis the Great, or Ampu in ancient Egyptian, is undoubtedly the most iconic and famous of the Egyptian gods. Every day, artists are inspired by his legend to create new interpretations of him. When I was a child, Anubis was my favorite god, and early in my adulthood I got a tattoo depicting the Lord of Embalmers. But who is this god that remained popular even for centuries after the end of the Egyptian civilization? This is what we will discuss today. There are two myths that explain the origins of Anubis. In some sacred texts, he is described as one of the many children of Ra. But Herodotus tells us that Nephthys decided to disguise herself as Isis, her sister, to seduce Osiris. Falling pregnant after his night, Nephthys was afraid of the reaction of her violent husband Set, and decided to abandon the child in the desert. Isis took pity of the child, and with the help of dogs, she found him and decided to adopt him. The kid grew up and became Anubis, one of the most loyal servants of Osiris. Regardless of the identity of his parents, Anubis has an essential role in the Osirian myth. He was the one who reconstructed the body of Osiris after Set dismembered it. Without Anubis, the old king would never be able to return among the living, and because of that, he became the protector of embalmers and the guide and judge of the dead. In the Old Kingdom, he was not only a judge, but a king of the realm of the dead, and one of the few deities that were worshipped in all Egypt. However, with the arrival of the cult of Osiris and the great popularity of it, the green god took for him the attributes of King of Eternity, and Anubis became his assistant. However, this does not mean that the respect of the Egyptians towards Anubis has diminished. The jackal god was still the one who guided and protected the dead at the final judgment, and without his help, his birth was impossible. With such a connection to death, it is not surprising that Anubis became the patron of embalmers, an art that according to myth was his invention. Embalming priests used to wear an Anubis mask while performing their rites, to be able to embody the god. To be mummified was a right of all Egyptians, and when a family did not have the means to pay the embalmers, tradition dictated that their village or their friends should help them. Of course, there were different services depending on the price you are willing to pay. The rich had the right to an elaborate mummification process with many magical amulets, while the poor had to be content with much simpler rites. However, it is important to make it clear that having a luxurious funeral service was not a guarantee to someone to enter in the field of rites. The cycle of Satiny tells us that one day the magician was walking with his son. One, they crossed two funeral processions, one from a very rich man with a golden coffin, and the other of a poor man with a coffin of wood. Satiny said that he desired to have the fate of the rich man, but his son replied that his hope was that his father met the same fate as the poor one. The young prince made a ritual for his father to travel into the throne room of Osiris, where Anubis were judging the dead. The rich man was crying. In his life, he was a corrupt man, and the jackal god threw his heart to Amut, the devourer. The poor man, however, was an honest man, and he could enter eternity and live with the gods. Satiny then said that his son was right. It's better to have a poor but honest life than a rich and corrupt one. The city of Sakka, in the 17th nome of Upper Egypt, was the capital of the cult of Anubis. Alas, we know almost nothing about this city, because not even ruins remain of her. The jackal god is not single, although this aspect of him is not often spoken of. He was married to the goddess Amput, a minor goddess associated with the process of mummification. With her, Anubis had a daughter, Kebeshet. He also has a brother who is often confused with him, Wip-Wawit, whose name means the one who opened the path. He had, in the Old Kingdom, the role of guide of the dead. However, when Anubis assumed this role, Wip-Wawit became a warrior deity who protected Ra on his journey to the world of the dead and the kings in battle. Anubis is often depicted as a jackal or a man with the head of an animal. Jackals are creatures often found in cemeteries, so it's logical to see why he was associated with Anubis. But if you have already seen a jackal before, you know that they are not black. The color of Anubis came from the fact that to the Egyptians, black was a color associated with life, because it was the color of the land when it was ready to be cultivated. In fact, the Egyptians even called their country Kemet, which means the Black Land. Although it's very rare, sometimes Anubis appears entirely as a human. The jackal god was interpreted by the Greeks as a version of Hermes, because the two gods are responsible for guiding the dead to the next world, and they named him Herma Anubis. Anubis traveled with Isis when her cult came to Rome. However, while she became extremely popular, the Romans had a bad time accepting a god with an animal head. Virgil writes in his classic, the Aeneid, the queen, in the midst of her fleet, called her soldiers to the sound of the Egyptian sistrum, and does not yet see the two vipers behind her, the monstrous deities of the Nile and the barker Anubis fight against Neptune, Venus, Minerva. With the advent of Christianity, Anubis was used to demonstrate how the Egyptian gods were savage. Aurelius Prudentus, a Christian poet, states, "What nation has a foolish mind a tongue barbaric enough, or what superstition is foolish enough to place a dog-headed barking Anubis on the reveling throne? But despite all these efforts and insults, the popularity of Anubis remained for a long time in Egypt. In fact, Saint Christopher, patron saint of travelers, had to borrow the visual of Anubis to be able to impose himself. As I said earlier, Anubis is to this day one of the most popular Egyptian gods. Personally, I don't know explain why, but I think it's owed to the fact that he looks so cool. Anubis is a dark, mysterious god who exists on the border of the unknown. But he is also a guide, a friend of those who have a noble heart.